Hello everyone, welcome to my burgery. Background on my aviary setup and design. When we built the house 11 years ago now, we decided to not have the aviary in the backyards, but incorporate it on the same roof as the house. So as you can see, the aviary's on the other side of the garage, so I can have access to the aviary through the garage. So please come in. As you can see here, we have a fly out for the birds to come out in the rain and sun. So most days the birds are out in that. Come in. What we have now is the bird room. The bird room consists of 4 factories, 8 breeding cabinets. We have light and ventilation to a north facing window and also an east facing window. So we have 2 windows for cross ventilation. What I do here, I have birds which I call dumping cages, so I put pairs in there prior to going to the breeding cages to try to listen to them. So we have from first page, here is page 1 through to 9. The 2 banks of 8. The middle bank is an island, so we can access right the way around the breeding room. What we have at the front now, a couple of triple bay windows allow us to front and back light and fresh air. So normally I'll have a double hung windows, I'll have them open cotton bottom. It's been quite windy today, so I've only got the bottom open. So it allows a lot of cross ventilation. Just to supplement natural ventilation, we have here a small air filter and ionizer, which is the first one I originally had. After that, I ventured into a larger air filtration system. This filtration system is designed for woodworking shops. So a friend of mine with an area breeder has a large one of these and it works great. What you see here is my nursery code, so the baby is nursery code. Also with ventilation, I have an inline ceiling fan which draws the air out to the ceiling. And also I've just installed air conditioning for the hot summer months. As we come down to the end here, this is our food preparation area. This is where all the work starts feeding the baby, the water and the food. My stationary section here. When you get older, you have to have a good memory. So then all my breeding records and kept in there, so it's for easy access. Another tip that I have with people ask a lot when they come to my station, what's this for, Joe? So what I have here, in the green is my ring numbers, and in the black is the nest numbers. This is the most important thing. This is how I determine how successful my breeding season has been. What we have here in the blue is the number of eggs that have been laid. In the green is the fertile eggs laid. And the black is the number of chicks that have hatched out of that. And the most important statistic out of all this board is in the red. You don't want to see any red. That's mortality rate. So that's what dies in the nest. That determines to me at the end of the year the percentage, my mortality percentage determines if I've had a successful breeding season or not. You need to keep your mortality rate record so that you can determine how successful your breeding season has been. Very important. What I have here, I have 2 holding pages. This page here is for all the babies. I've got 2 holders in the nursery cage and a feeding for themselves. They're staying here until they're quite efficient in looking after themselves. What we have here is another holding page for old birds. The head birds come out of the cabinet. Down here is another holding page for just allowing them to species, and we have some one pages here. And from the breeding room, we have the flowers. Two flowers, roughly 4.5 metres by 1800. So the high ceiling, the high surface, just to keep the bird in check. Okay, what I'm doing now is feeding my young birds. As you can see, the angle of the needle over the tongue against the side of the head, and that's the angle the needle goes down. So these birds only need one needle, about 3.5 minutes. In between feeding the birds, doing the disinfectant, sterilise the block. The needles are contained up the block. Temperature is going to 30 degrees. How I hold the bird, which is a normal grip there with our thumb on the side of the head. Needle coming in at right angles, across the beak. Follow the angle of our thumb down. Put it in, take them around. So disinfect the block. I have 2 needles in the same aperture, so I can have 2 needles running at the same time. One's disinfecting, the other one's being checked. These birds are quite used to it. So normally I have only up to 10, 20 birds, sometimes I have 60 birds sitting around there. So what I'll do is I do this for birds. I put them out in the one to work them back into the cage. One is to check the bird out, see how it's progressing with the right setup. And the other thing is the bird's feet, you can check the size of the bird's feet, and you can also check the temperature of the bird. When a bird is in good condition and good with its strength, its feet are quite warm. So what I do, I can snap this up now. You can get an idea, they get used to it being handled. So I can snap them back and place them back in the holding bag. It's a good indicator to see how well the bird is. You can see the bird, you can see its shape on its finger, and they get used to it. What happens once a bird is getting to the stage where it's getting old enough to fly, as soon as it flies with my finger, it doesn't go back in the nursery cage or go back to the holding cage. So you can see the shape and the style of the bird, different to a lovely thing. Showing the different age of the birds that I feed, and also what needles I use for each age group. And you can see there's quite a varying age difference. And I feed all these chicks. This is the baby chick I got out of the egg this morning. I'm going to feed that now. As you can see, Troy, there's only air in that at the moment. So what you want to do is just hold the bird slightly by the head. Make sure it's nice and warm on the hand. And just open his mouth. And you'll see him starting to eat that now. Size his beak up a little bit. You can see it eating that now. You can see it coming down already. Down the side there. So just hold it back again. In his mouth. And just let him eat it himself. So he's eating that now. You can see it going down the side of his neck. Don't force it, it's got to. So he's taking it down now. See how he's slowing that down? Rise his beak a bit. Sometimes the needle gets a bit stuck, so. You can see it coming down the side of his neck now. That's all there is to it. You can see this bloke. I've just finished pulling him. That's about the maximum you need in his crop. You can fill it up to about that degree. These birds, 2 weeks old. So this is a little bit bigger needle. As you can see, that crop is quite a bit in the crop, so you can still get enough of that needle down there just to give it a bit more. You don't have to put too much in. Just to pop that crop up. Same with his mate. His mate's got a lot of feed in his crop. So just down the side. And pop that up. Yep. This is the largest needle I use. It's designed especially for Budgerigar, so got a short shaft, larger bowl. Just on the right angle, as you can see where the thumb is, come in the right angle and just follow the angle of the thumb. You can see that being filled up, so that's about 2 mil now. So I've filled the crop right up. So that's the supplementary feed overnight. But as you can see, I haven't fed this, but look at how much the mother's feeding this. I've found that since I've been supplementing feeding the babies, the hen birds, even though they don't have to feed as often, when they do feed, they always feed well. So that's a good indicator that the nest is getting fed. And there's 5 chicks in this nest. I'll just put the last little bit of that in there. Done. This the nest is spangled, hopefully a normal spangle and a melanistic spangle. Same thing, thumb on the side, coming in at right angles, and just let the bird take it down. Don't force the needle, the bird will swallow it. I think this young baby's got a lot of promise. Depth of mask, the roundness, the cap's starting to come. I've got this special budgie. It's something you don't see very often with melanistic spangle, but this one's quite a big budgie. Beautiful down. A nice top end. Beautiful coarse body fella. Beautiful down coming through that. And it's going to be quite a big chick. to the people out there that actually don't breed spangles, when the discs actually have what looks like two spangles and a normal. You know, an open spangle in the foreground and a normal spangle at the back, and in the middle looks like a normal spangle. Normal, sorry, just a normal. But under close examination, you will notice that the bird is actually a melanotic spangle. Very dark wing markings with a normal spangled tail. What's very distinctive on a melanotic spangle is the actual black striping up the feathers. You can see on the tail feathers and the secondary tail feathers, the black stripe. And this is when you'll notice when the bird matures, you'll still see that black stripe up the feather. This is a very good characteristic of this variety. I'm just about now to refill my indoors. I'll just explain the product. Sorry, over here it's a charcoal and mineral grit through a local supplier. The BVM pink powder, which you can get at any produce store. This is the Volkman grit from Aid in Vitality, which the birds really enjoy. And lastly, this is my dry mix of herbs, spices and small seeds. And this is a culmination of what Martin Halen and Mike Ball are using in their stock food. The dry mix that I'm trialling in the finger drawers, and I also put it in with my seed mix. I won't go into detail of what it's all about, but it's all the products that Mike and Martin have used. So it probably consists, I will release it when I trial a little bit longer, but it's got herbs, spices, small seeds, beetroot powders and turmeric, all the things that Mike and Martin Halen are using. So I'd like to just trial it for 12 months and see what effect it has on the birds. But I'm just today going to trial it in the finger drawers. What I'd like to do now is explain my supplementary feeding or soft food. What we have here is sprouted mung beans, which I sprout myself. My little blender, I've had that for nearly 20 years. That's what I blend up the ingredients. So what I have here is chicory, carrot, red capsicum, ruby chard and silver beet. And these are the herbs. I have saltbush at the front, rosemary, it's been stripped from the branch, bay leaf, which I've cut from the branch, and broccoli. These 4 ingredients are put through the blender. And here I have sweet corn, frozen sweet corn that's been soaked and boiling and just drying out at the moment. What I'll do, I'll prepare the ingredients and I'll show you the mix when it's complete. Okay, the shame this phone hasn't got sensory capabilities. You can just go absolutely glorious. The rosemary, the broccoli, bay leaf, all chopped up in the blender, mixed in with the mung beans. Now prepared grated carrot. This is the diced chicory cut up very fine with a knife. Where the stems of the silver beet and the ruby chard. Silver beet, ruby chard cut up very fine. This is the red capsicum. As you can see, I don't throw away the seeds. The seeds are so important for the birds. I absolutely love the seeds. So I'll prepare all this now and show you the finished product. The corn's just about ready to dry out, ready to go now. Okay, now we have the finished product with all the vegetables and herbs and carrots and corn. To this, I add 4 large cups of seed mix. Now this seed mix has been prepared earlier. It consists of 50% feed-based mix and oats and hull oats and soy oats mixed 50-50. That is then prepared with cod liver oil and wheat germ oil and a bit of good oil. Into that I put a bag of my dry mix. which I mentioned earlier on in the presentation. This dry mix has a total of 14 different ingredients, and seeds, turmeric, powders, and that's what I add. And this is the finished product, and that is added to the vegetable mix. I did forget to mention that I do grate beetroot as well, but I didn't have any beetroot today, so I do grate beetroot in that as well. Okay, now the mix is complete. As you can see, the spoon I use is a soup spoon. So this is how I prepare and feed for the birds. So it's approximately 2 soup spoons per dish. So what's good enough to eat ourselves. This is the treat that I give the birds during the winter months. Chickweed. The rest will be picked on the morning when there's a lot of fresh winter dew. Just putting in the cabinet now. So you can see most birds are going into them and wet them. It's a really good treat for the birds. They can get in there and get all their feathers moist. It's something that they really enjoy. Especially when they're feeding babies, the cockbirds seem to really get into the chickweed.
While these videos are going through, I'll explain that some of these, well, majority of these birds have come straight out of breeding cabinets, so they're not in good condition to be taken photos of, but you can get an idea of the feather direction and the cap and the brow and depth of mask. This family of birds here are very long birds, really good length. This is a 2019 baby.
Huh? Yeah. I'm trying to watch it.
This bird here was pulling back a lot. He's got a better photo later on in the wire cage. This is the fella that was all up and down the chickweed. This hen was in a breeding cabinet as well. This guy's got a head full of pin feathers. It's not the ideal time to be taking photos of a bird like this. This is a young 2019 violet sky whitecap, which I really like. This is the father of that big violet sky. He doesn't look much to look at here because he's in a breeding cabinet, but he's a cracking bird when he's in good good condition. When he's in show condition, he's a lovely bird. Very high curl from the top head to the feet. And very fertile. I'd like an aviary full of cockbirds like this bloke. These are only young hens. Late bred 2019. This was a November bred 19 hen. I just got in a bonding cage now trying to get her to pair up, but she doesn't like cockbirds. This is off a white cap, dominant pied. You've seen eating the chicory, the chickweed. This is the father of that first white cap. This guy here, he was too tall for the little photography cage and he kept squatting down. You'll see he's pulling himself down because he was too tall for the top of the cage. This is its sister, and the photo doesn't do it justice because it's just every bit as long as the cockbird. This poor old hen, I've just taken her off 4 chicks, so she doesn't look the best, but that's another lovely hen when she's in condition.
How long do you think they'd measure, Gary?
Oh, they'd be up, I don't know, 270, 275, I suppose. They are long birds. This was the first chick in the first round. I got the one the first round, but I love this hen. She's a long budgie. Doesn't do her much justice, the photos, but this is that cockbird I showed. I'd said that didn't want to show in the photography cage. This is a brother to the violet sky.
So Gary, this is the one you asked me to pause on.
Yep. What I said to the guys when we ran through this video last night, something that's I looked at and said, I don't have that feature on my birds, and it's very distinctive. Where Troy's running that cursor over the area above the cheek patch is the amount of feather from the mask going up to the eye, and it fills in that face. There's so much mask feather in there. When a bird's face is on, it's just gives you that really wide impact across the face. Something we all should be looking at to try to, Mike Ball says, fill in behind the ears, and that's what he's talking about.
You also talked about, Gary, that line running through here with those cheek patches being almost horizontal.
Yes, yeah. What we do, Mark and I have been, well, Mark's probably the guy that picks out all the fine points, but we're looking at trying to drop that. The further the mask comes down, the further it goes around the shoulder. So, we're looking at birds when we're pairing them up to get the cheek patch as low as we can down on the mask. When you look at that bird now, if you have a look at the distance from his sear to the cheek patch, all that yellow area where Troy's going in there now, it just gives you that impact, that really wide face. And it's not only above the sear we've got to concentrate on, it's the feathering below the sear as well. We've got to fill in that area where Troy's got the cursor now, in that area there.
So, Gaz, you're talking about traditionally that narrow part of the face on the keyhole.
Yes, exactly. We've got to eliminate the keyhole effect, and having that feathering in there, concentrating on finding birds when you're pairing have got that feather. That's what we need to do. If you want to get anywhere near the European birds, we need to increase the feathering on the side of the sear. This bird was November bred. There's 4 brothers here. There's 3 2019, and the fellow at the back is 2018. He didn't want to be here on the day. He was right out of it. There's some other photos following this up. You'll get a better indication what sort of budgie this guy is. He didn't want to be here when we're doing this. This is a lovely hen too. She's only a baby. This is another brother, 2018 Spangled Cockbird. This is the 2019 version. I love this cockbird. When he's in good condition, he's beautiful top end. You can see again that yellow area, but from the sear to the eye.
Just missed it.
This is the cock. This is the son of that cinnamon spangle I said didn't want to be there. These were very late bred last year, so they'd only be 9 months old at best. I've only just placed this hen in a breeding cabinet last week. This guy come out of a breeding cabinet too. I just wanted to show this bird the amount of cap he's got over the eye. Terrible condition to be taking photos of him, but this is his hen bird again that I really like. But I'm finding it very difficult to find a male bird to go with it because he doesn't like cockbirds. This bird's from a similar line as the of those birds, not closely related, but similar background. I shouldn't be showing this photo, but this was straight out of the nest. This is the mother of all those violet skies, and she's a sister to the Spangled cinnamons. This is the biggest hen bird I own, and she's probably got the most amount of feather of any hen I own. These were cousin pairs I tried to bond, but not long after I took that photo, she built hell out of that cockbird. This is the father of the melanistics. He's probably got the longest feather of any cockbird I have. Now, this is this early photo of the good bloke when he was a baby. He's 5 months old there. That's 109 when he was in better feather. The fellow I said wish I had a whole aviary full of them. This is when I love looking at babies when they're that age. There he is again. That's 109 again in show condition. That's 300. It's a baby white cat, believe it or not. That's 80. He's in a lot of my pedigrees. All the pieds are all siblings, mostly siblings.
All right. We're done with the video. That comes through okay on your end, Gazzy?
Yes, yeah, it was fine. Just that first section we had trouble with last night, but all the rest after that was fine.
Excellent. You'll be happy to know that you've broken all records, mate. We're at 80 people. So you've
I hope there's 80 satisfied people.
you set the bar very high, and it is a testament to obviously your 10 national wins and being an AMBC Hall of Fame inductee. There's a lot of people interested to hear what you had to say tonight, and I guess some of the secrets behind your ovary management and your successes. You were telling us last night about a story, a Jeff Tuplin experience in the UK. Do you want to share that with the group?
Yes, I will. I actually spoke to Jonathan again this afternoon when we were talking. He said, that was right, Gary. I went out and checked the birds this afternoon. If you noticed when I was having the young birds on my hand and walking back to the cage, if I'm pairing birds up and I'm catch up a cockbird in the aviary, I put his feet up to my mouth. His feet are cold. I let him go and I don't take him out of the flights. Their feet have to be warm to hot before I'll pair them up. It's a waste of time putting a cockbird up with cold feet because he won't be fertile. And just going on that further, when we were in Europe 4 or 5 years ago now, we were lucky enough to visit some great breeders, and another guy in England we visited was Jeff Tuplin. And Jeff has a procedure that he actually checks for sperm on every cockbird before he pairs it up. If it doesn't have sperm, he doesn't put it in a breeding cabinet. So I said to him on the day, I said, Jeff, I have a similar method to that, but I just kiss their feet. And he looked at me and this queer look on his face to kiss his feet. Bloody blokes from Oz, they know what they're doing. So I said, I get their feet, because the lip's so sensitive, you can feel the temperature so easily on your lip. So he said, let me try it. So what he done, every bird that he put up to his mouth that had hot feet, it had sperm, because he just checked it and had sperm. And Jonathan this afternoon said to me, I tried that just today, because I checked for sperm too, and he said, you are right. He said, every bird with hot feet had sperm. And that's an indicator for the babies too. That's why I put them on my finger and walk them back to my holding cage. Because if they're struggling and not eating well, their feet are icy cold. And when a bird's healthy and active and it's good, its feet are warm, really warm. So that's something you want to look at.
When I was looking at a go doing it, the ones that I knew, weren't ready, they really have got cold feet. And the ones that are fertile, really, it is quite a big difference.
Yeah.
Gazzy, it must be a challenge doing 50 birds, walking them back and forth between that kitchen sink and that hospital cage.
That's why I'm so fit.
You must be the only man to do 10,000 steps over a 5 metre distance. One of your biggest successes, I know from having spent time with you, is your ability to get pairs to breed. And I think when we heard the presentation there, we probably glossed over it a little bit. But I think my takeaway from seeing what you do is that one of your greatest successes is your pair bonding. You don't give birds a cabinet until they're pair bonded. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's not, I don't think I stick to it religiously. When I start up at the beginning of the year, I'll put them in cages, during the day, and I'll see if they bond up. And as the cabinets are cleaned and ready to be placed, I'll put them in. The pair bonding is mainly when I have all the cabinets full and, getting to an end of a round, and I thought, well, I've got to, I'll have 3 or 4 pairs ready to come out in a month. So I'll start putting pairs up to bond them. And that's worked quite well over the years.
So tell us about the love pair. How did the love pair come together?
Where's Mark Fellows? Mark Fellow christened him the love pair. We were just catching birds up. Go on, Mark, take over.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, Gary and I were having one of those 3-hour sessions in his bird room looking at birds. And we were looking at young birds. They must have only been about 5 or 6 months old. So they wouldn't have been old enough to pair up at that time. And as soon as we put this young cock and hen in the show cage to look at, they instantly fell in love. And then we sat back and went, well, they really complement each other, and the rest is history.
Yeah, rest is history, as they say.
Nice.
But it's not only that, love. There's a lot of common birds in their backgrounds. It's just not, it was, you know, fate took its play and they paired up. But if you paired up looking at their pedigree is so strong. I said to Mark, look at this pedigree here. It has every substantial bird in that pedigree. I colour code my substantial birds over the years, and that pairing had every substantial bird that I mark in its pedigree.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll add is those two birds visually themselves were very good quality birds.
Yeah.
That cock and that hen were probably the best cock or in the top couple of cocks of that year, and the same with the hen. So it was one of those
No-brainers.
lightning bolts where they were two really good visual birds that just fell in love. Yeah.
Yeah. Gazzy, one of the questions we're being asked, the mortality numbers you talked about was something that was really interesting.
Yes.
Define good and bad. You know, if I said to you 10%, is that good?
Yes, that's good.
25?
25 is poor.
20?
20 is reasonable. If you can get under 20, you're doing all right. People laugh at me when I say, geez, that's a lot, but 20 birds, that's, you know, that's 5 in every bloody 20. What is it, 5 in 20 in every 100?
Yeah.
You're losing. But if you take a record and just study how many birds you lose, you don't realise you're losing as many chicks as you do. Like, it never occurred to me until I started taking statistics on it of how many birds you lose. And one thing it does, it makes you reflect on your breeding management. Now, if you take records and you'll notice that your mortality rate's getting, the graph's going up and your breeding numbers are going down, well, your breeding management's wrong. You're doing something wrong because all the graphs are going the wrong way. So you need to change what you're doing to change what's happening. And that's how I started doing it, mainly because when I first moved into this house here, it took a few years before the birds adjusted to it, and the breeding numbers were going down and the mortality rate was going up. And I thought, so what am I doing? What do I have to change to turn that around? And it might not have any relativity to why I changed it, but I used to throw, because we've got an acre here, and I used to save my water. So I was throwing all the water out of the breeding cabinets into a bucket. Then as you notice when I walked in the door, there's Morea hedging all around us. I started throwing that water over the Morea hedging. And within a few months, all that Morea hedging started dying. And I thought it might have no relevance to the products. But I said, if it's going to kill the Moreas, what's it doing to our birds' gut systems? So I went back then and took them off every proprietary product, no vitamins, supplements, just plain water. Then over a period of time, I added some natural products, which was Manuka honey, Origo stem, which is just oregano, and I use citric acid in a powder form. And since I've been doing that in the last 4 years, I guess last year with 52 cabinets, I bred over 450 birds, and the mortality rate was below 20%.
Excellent. Now, just somebody's asked a question. When you define mortality rate, it's from, there's a
percentage. So what I do is actually take the percentage of the chicks in the nest and divide it by the mortality rate divided by the chicks in the nest.
So does a chick that's hatching that fails to hatch a dead in shell count in?
Dead in shell doesn't come into consideration. It's only the chicks that hatch.
Yep. So it's from the
One's going to have dead in shell at some time. That's, you know, you can put that down to weather conditions. So that's something you can't control. Or you can, or probably if you have it regularly, but I don't have a lot of dead in shell. I do have it, but not to the extent where it's going to make me change my breeding program. But it's only birds that come out, birds that actually hatch.
Yep. Now, Gaz, one of the questions being asked, when did you start crop feeding? We obviously see that you can feed one-day olds. And I guess with your management process, you're very fixated on making sure you're getting as many of those chicks on the perch as you can from the point they hatch. But when did you actually start this crop feeding, this supplementary feeding program? And then obviously the second question leading on from that, do you believe it makes the birds bigger, or is it just to make it easier to wean them away from the parents?
It started when I went off the proprietary products.
So probably
So
years ago?
I was spending all my time preparing soft foods and sprouted seeds and sprouted this and sprouted that, feeding the birds. I was getting hen birds with runny bums that weren't feeding. So I thought to myself, this is not working for me. So what I'd done then, instead of feeding the parents, I thought, I'm going to go think out of the square and do something different. I'm going to feed the chicks, not the parents.
Yeah.
So that's when it all started. I thought, what can I do that's going to improve the breeding season and improve the chicks? So when I stopped preparing, I used to spend hours preparing soft foods. So when I stopped that, I still do it now, but when I stopped, I use different soft food now, but when I stopped that, took them off the soft foods, the sprouted seeds, not soft foods, I'll rephrase that. I had sprouted seeds. So when I stopped sprouting seeds, the hen birds are always healthier. And when I started feeding the babies, it gave a break to the parent birds, because the parent birds always continually feeding the chicks. If I broke that cycle and gave them a rest, they seemed to recuperate quicker while they were feeding. So they lasted in the nest a lot longer in good condition, because they didn't have to feed as much.
That makes good sense. What age, I noticed with the hospital cage, and you use it as a nursery cage, what age do you take the chicks away from their parents generally, or what is it you look for? A lot of people obviously look for the primary tail feathers to be longer than the secondaries. You take them away a bit earlier than that, and they've got the heat in there. What is it for you?
Just a quick question. I just seen a chat question come up. Yes, calcium. Oh, sorry, I add, that's part of my water mix. So it's Origo stem, Manuka honey, and calcium. Sorry. Yeah. So going back to that, the reason another reason I started feeding the babies, because how many of us breeders of budgerigars have come up and say they, mate, I've got a cracker in the nest at the moment. It's a ripper. Come on next day and it's on the floor, its head taken off. Now, I reckon everybody can relate to that. They've got a screamer in the nest. They come home the next day and it's come out of the nest and the hen or the cock's took its head off. And I thought, that's not going to happen to me. So as soon as any chick in that nest decides it's getting out of the box, it doesn't go back in. And I don't care if it's 4 weeks old, or I'll put it straight into that hospital cage, because that hospital cage is the nursery cage and it's set at about 27 degrees constantly. So if a chick pops out of that nest, regardless of how old it is, it doesn't go back in.
Yeah. Now, Gaz, obviously I know the answer to this question, but tell us about the way you go about interrupting your laying hens, or your level of what I would call interruption, knowing everyone's seen tonight that you'll feed a chick from 1 day old. So there's a lot of interruption. You're pulling the box out. You're doing things there. What about when they're actually laying?
Yeah, look, the birds need a routine. So I get up in the morning, have my breakfast, and I'll go out. I'll feed the babies around 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30, that sort of hours of the morning. And I'm not one for over checking nest boxes, but you have to check them, of course. And I'll feed them again after they do their water at night. So I get fed around 4:30, 5 o'clock. But when they're laying, you got to check the boxes, when you put your pairs in. So I have a system where I place little stickers. So I've got excuse me, I have to have a drink.
So my experience with you, Gazzy, would be that the two are polar opposites. So your interaction, once those eggs are hatched, your intervention is huge, but you actually have very little to do with them, and very little interaction. You avoid opening those boxes when they're laying and disturbing them. Would I be right in saying that?
That's pretty well on the mark. Once I've identified that the hen's laid, I have a little white sticker which I write the date on. I put that on the tray of the nest box or the breeding cabinet, and I might check it again, every 3 or 4 days. I don't check it every day. Once the hen's laid, I just leave it in peace. you have to, when you get, you know the date it's going to hatch, you probably have to check a little bit more regularly. But I don't overcheck. I don't like to disturb the hens. I've never ever marked my eggs and moved them. I'd never have much success if I move eggs. So I like to actually move the chicks when they're born. If I know a hen's got a problem with feeding or any other issue, I'll wait till the egg actually hatches and I'll move the chick. I don't like moving eggs. Most people do. It's just something that doesn't work for me. I don't have a lot of success if I move eggs. So I don't overcheck the nest boxes when they're laying.
So ironically, I was visiting Henry George at one point, and you kissed the feet. Henry George kissed the eggs, and I'd never seen it before. And I jokingly asked him what he was doing. He said to me he was doing exactly what you do with the feet. He said that you ladle an egg moving it between nests. So he was putting the egg against his lips and then checking an egg from that nest to make sure that it was actually the same temperature before he moved it. He said otherwise he wouldn't be moving it. So I've had another question come through on here. It says, do you have many feather issues like French molt, and would you use a French molter?
Yes, if at the end of the season, it's not actually the birds that get stressed, which they do, but it's probably the owner that gets a bit lazy. If you're not cleaning your boxes out weekly and keeping the hygiene up into your breeding cabinets, soon as a bird, and that's in the feeding program as well, when you get tired, you don't give them as much attention as they need. The birds sense that, they get stressed out because they're not getting the food requirements they need. It just rolls on from there and you get French molt. And there's varying degrees of French molt. I do use them because in most cases, a lot of birds will drop all their flights and tails, and if they haven't shown any indication they're all back within a week or 2 weeks, they'll never come back. If in 1 or 2 weeks, the birds are fine, the whole row of feathers are back. Now, they're the birds that have no issues. They just drop them and they're all back in the weaning cage in 5-6 weeks' time. You wouldn't even know they're French molters. And the heavy ones, I don't use them if I don't have to.
Yeah. Gaz, what's your aim for the birds this season? What do you obviously have a personal mission with them in terms of what you want to develop, or you're really fixated on one feature? And we should probably ask Mark because he'd tell us the truth.
Well, it's not only this season. We were lucky enough to do that trip to Europe, and that changed my concept and how I wanted to breed budgies. Now, we've seen the best breeders in Europe and the best breeders in England. And Mike Ball typifies, this is what I got most out of Mike's explanation of what he wants to see in a bird. He wants frame. He said, get the frame first, then put the overcoat on it. And he's talking about feather. So when we come home, and this is not only like for this year, it was the last 2-3 years, I look for birds with the bigger birds with frame. I just put big to big and kept going from there, looking at the intricacies of the feather on the cap and the mask and the lateral feathering, but tried to put the biggest birds together. And over the last 3 years, luckily enough, there's been more pairs of those bigger frame birds because they've been increasing year after year. So it's not rocket science. I just went home after Europe and I thought, well, Mark and I, we confer very, very closely. Not sometimes more to our wives' liking, but we confer very closely. And that's what we made a decision that because I still had cap feather and lateral feather, but my birds were too small. So I said, I need to forget about just the face now and start improving the budgie's frame. And that's what I've done the last 3 or 4 years. Looking at different features on feather length's very important. Looking for different areas on the back of the neck for feather length, and what I pointed out, the amount of yellow feathering down the side of the cere and position of the cheek patch, how low it's coming on the cere. So you've got to take all those features into consideration, but you also have to I am trying to emphasise frame.
Makes good sense. Now, Gazzy, obviously you've got 80 people on here tonight that want to, glean some secrets from you. Is there anything else you can share?
No secrets. I don't give out any secrets for nothing.
Is there any other secrets you can share with us to your success?
Success? Yeah, a 4-letter word, luck.
It seems like the harder you work, the luckier you get.
You've got, look, honestly, you have to have a little bit of luck, like the love pair. You know, if they didn't bond that cage, they've taken me to another level. Going back probably around the Coffs Harbour era of the Nationals, I had a pair of birds that were in a holding cage. Cockbird, if you put him in the flights, he'd fall to pieces. He hated the flight. So I had him in a holding cage. And there was a young hen that broke or dislocated a wing as a baby in the flight. So I put that in a holding cage and they bonded and I paired them up. I got 3, 4, 5 national winners out of that pair, all their siblings. So that was luck. That wasn't planned. That was just luck. So you need that little ounce of luck at times to get over the line. But it's, look, I put it down to, I tell a lot of our novice breeders, it's that 1%ers. You hear the terminology a lot of football. It's the 1%ers. If you're not putting in the 1%ers, you won't get to where you want to go.
I'd completely agree, wholeheartedly. Gaz, when we interviewed you back in 2007, you mentioned you got into budgies in the 80s thanks to a disused greenhouse. Obviously, with the hobby where it is today and where it's going, we're very insular here in Australia in our ability to bring birds in. Backyards are getting smaller, and most of the people who are obviously in budgerigars these days were in budgies as a kid. What do you think we can do within the hobby to grow the hobby? What do you see as, you know, you've always been somebody who's really assisted the beginner, helped people out enormously, myself included. What do you think we can do to make the hobby more sustainable and to grow it?
Yeah, that's a $64 million question, Troy. I've gone over this in my mind since we spoke about the other day. It's a matter, if you have someone come to your meeting that shows interest in breeding budgerigars, you want to treat him like you've just won the lottery, because we don't get many of them. We need a mentoring system. If you've got a new member there, we need each club in Australia, each budgerigar club around Australia needs to have mentoring systems in place, because if you don't approach this member and see what he wants and what his needs are in breeding budgies, if we lose that member, that's one member close to extinction in their hobby, because there's not many young ones coming through with all the technology these days. Kids don't want to breed budgies. So if you're lucky enough to get new people come in your door at your meeting, you want to treat them like gold.
Very good advice.
Look, I'll just further on to that. Mentoring is great, but as clubs and as individual budgerigar breeders, we need to help each other. Very important fact I got when I was overseas, Mike Ball, Daniel Lutoff, they help each other with birds. They spread birds around so they've got access to birds. So we've got to work together. You know, you've got to find a mate in your club or a couple of mates that are willing to put work yards in and, you know, distribute birds amongst each other, because the only way we're going to progress if we increase that gene pool of good quality budgies, and we've got to trust each other. That's what it comes down to.
I think, Gazzy, when we interviewed you in 2007, you mentioned back then that you bred the very first national winner you had. It was 14,785.92 or something. You'd mentioned about that particular bird. You'd put some birds from imports together, and you'd actually noted then that you felt like you bred a bird that was well ahead of its time, purely because those English breeders at the time hadn't worked together. You know, they wouldn't partner up over in the UK. And here in Australia, we bought birds from different studs, combined those bloodlines, and obviously things gelled and worked very quickly and advanced. So there's certainly a lot of merit in that, and obviously sharing around that top gene pool. I have got another question here. Wayne is asking, do you pluck or trim the vents?
I was just going to answer that. Yes, I actually trim the vents with scissors. Just lightly trim the vents.
And there's nothing else that you do to them? That's it? Both on the hen and the cock?
Yeah, hen and cock. And just, you know, I'm not a believer of, if a pair are breeding well, and they're not under any stress and they're in good condition. I've, the love pair last year had 4 rounds. They didn't feed many.
Yep.
They had 4 rounds.
Nice.
And they were quite happy to be in there. They'd only feed 1 or 2 free chicks maximum per round, but I just kept farming the chicks away. I'm just going to read this one on the bottom here.
Just asking whether you keep your hens
No,
in separate flights.
no, I don't. Never have.
So I think when I was up there, you told me that was because you wanted the young cockbirds to learn how to make the hens rather than working out in a breeding cage.
It's a communal system. You know, they need to learn from the older birds. So I don't separate hens and cocks, young birds or old birds. Oh, sorry. I do separate them, but different format. The keepers and the culls, that's the only separation they have. The birds I like go on one flight, the birds I don't like go on the other. That's my separation process.
Yeah. Another question for you guys. How do you deal with the flecking issues coming through? You've got a marking system now. Do you want to share with the group?
I'm probably an advocate for trying to eliminate it. And we're not going to be able to do that unless we take a really strong stand on it. What I've done this year, which I've never done before, and I think it'll give me an indication over the next 2 or 3 seasons is how it's going. I've actually rated every bird I pair up. So I call it head marking. I don't call it flecking or ticking, or I just call it head marking. So I rate a bird from 0 to 5. So that 5 being the heaviest marking. And what I want to do over the next couple of breeding seasons is go back over those records and see how they pass it on. If you're putting a cockbird with a HM0, which is head marking 0, to a hen that's got a HM4, does it average itself out, or do you get clean or heavy, or do you just get all? So I want to really do a bit of statistical work on that. We need to eliminate it because people say to me, oh, you've got to have fleck birds for spot, you've got to have fleck birds for this. Have a look in England and Europe. They've got massive birds with big spots, but they're clean as a whistle. So that argument doesn't lie for me anymore. You know, we're the ones that have to stop the flecking, and we're only going to do that by the way we pair them up.
Yeah. Gary, another question being asked. Do you want to explain to the group the number of rare varieties that you breed? It certainly pulls Mark's hair out.
Not my rare varieties, be normals and spangles.
So I think last year there was clear wings in the mix.
Well, that was a love thing there. A guy asked me would I try to. Well, I didn't. He didn't ask me. I asked him. Well, it was Don Burke, because I went down there and fell in love with his heritage clear wings, the clarity of the wing marking, and the contrast between body, feather, and wing was brilliant. So I thought, now, bugger, I'm going to get a few of them. So I brought them home, and I was breeding those, and they were, if not anything else, they were great fosters. Yeah. So, I was using them as fosters as well, but I was still breeding them. But then the white caps come around, and I thought to myself, I've got to make space for these white caps. So I let the clear wings go, put the white caps, and the same person said to me, I've got some black-eyed whites here, and they're really good ones, and I don't want to lose this line of birds. Would you mind taking some for me? So he gave me a pair of black-eyed whites, and that turns out now to about 7 or 8 cabinets of black-eyed yellows.
So I think at one point there you also had golden faces, didn't you?
Yeah, well, the golden faces did go when the white caps come in.
Yeah. So we probably should talk about the rare varieties you don't have more than the ones that you do have.
I don't have clear wings. I don't have grey wings and recessives.
I'm getting asked.
What are you laughing for, fellas? I don't have lace wings either. No, that's albinos.
Richard Eppelson's asked a very good question and an interesting one. Do you believe we have to bring birds in from overseas to achieve those great birds, or do you think we can do it from the gene pool and from the hard works that the likes of you are putting in here in Australia?
We've still got it here. All those birds we bought in the 90s, that blood is still it. We don't have to. In my opinion, we don't have to. All that feather is here. People just have to recognise it. on birds without the feather length. People get a little bit confused and not seeing the feather in the right places because it's not long enough. You know, years ago when I first got the imported birds and we bred on from them, the cap feather and the lateral feather started coming, but you didn't recognise it because it didn't have much length of feather. You've got to identify the different traits, something different on a bird, and then grow. Then you've got to grow that feather length. So there's a lot of birds out there that have all that same feathering as Europeans have. They just have it in a miniature size. We've just got to grow the feather, get that pairing up, doubling up on the feather. There's enough birds here now. That, look, I'm not the only bloke that's got feather length in birds. There's a lot of good breeders in Australia that have really good lateral feathering, yourself included, Troy. We just need to concentrate on growing the length of that feather.
Now, Kerry's asking a question. Gary, in terms of that flecking, I know you mentioned you're doing some research into it and you'll reflect back on it, but do you believe it's a recessive trait, a dominant trait, or a sex-linked trait based on what you've seen?
Oh, I think it's got a little bit of sex-linked trait in it. I don't think that's solely the issue. Excuse me, and I don't think it's completely dominant either. It could be semi-dominant. I don't think it's completely dominant.
I think we talked at one point that you felt like it attached itself somewhere near where that opaline gene did, because you tend to find that a lot of the better opalines tend to have that flecking attached to them. So
yeah, you can contribute that then back in your cinnamon, opaline cinnamon as well. Most of your heavily flecked birds have opaline in them somewhere.
Yeah.
You have a look at Mike Ball's birds. He doesn't have much flecking, but he doesn't have any opalines either.
Yeah.
All his birds are virtually normal spangles and cinnamons, so, and pieds. That's, you know, maybe that having that opaline factor, it might be a contributing factor into why we're getting so many birds that are flecked. Something that people with more brains than me need to work on.
All good. Well, I think we've exhausted the questions over on the side. Is there any other questions anybody wanted to pop on there for the chat for Gary before we hand back to Chris? No? All right. Well, Gary, thank you very, very much for tonight. I know that I definitely enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone else did. We'll be putting the video on YouTube as well as the original one, so everyone can watch that first little bit with the correct pixelation. Rather,
it's a shame because the video we looked at the other day, the audio and the video were perfect. So it was a bit of disappointment that it didn't get the true effect of the quality. But I think you've seen enough and heard enough to understand the whole concept of what I do.
Well, I think Gary, Don from Dreamtime has just summed it up there. He's just written easily the best Australian startup I've seen. Super modern birds, pure quality. Well done, Gary. So, and Neil Love just chimed in with thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. Edra's also chimed in with the same, absolute gold. So, thank you very, very much for your time and for the donation of the bird and everything you've done, obviously, to support this evening. I know we've done a few run-throughs. So, and thank you to Mark for the filming and joining in behind the scenes and helping Gaz prepare and also convince him to do it. Much appreciated. So, all right, we'll
just like to say thank you to you for doing all that editing on the video, and thank you to the club for allowing me to display what I do in my little bird room.
Thank you. All right, we'll hand back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Troy. Everyone's stolen all my thank yous, so thank you all. One thing I just want to add is you probably don't realise how much effort, or maybe you do after tonight, how much effort Gary and Mark and Troy and Jonathan have put into the video tonight. It takes a lot of time to pre-record these and then muck around with all the different types of versions and try and get the syncing right and the editing right. So on behalf of everybody to you four, thank you all very, very much. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
I've got nothing more to add. Have a good night, everybody. Those in Victoria, keep safe.
Keep out of New South Wales.
Yeah, get on top of that virus, because if it gets out of Victoria, it gets over in all the other states, we've got problems. Take care, everyone. And Jonathan, just let everyone disappear off before you kill the leak, please. So good night, everybody, and take care, and we'll see you in a month's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Good night, all.
Everyone say good night.
Good night. Thanks, Jonathan, for all your help.
No
See you,
worries.
Gary. It was
Yeah.
very educational. Thank you.
Early.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Emmy Lou.